Hello, and welcome back to In Between Sessions, the podcast where we explore how to care for your mental health in the moments that happen outside the therapy room. I'm your host, Lili, and I'm so glad you're here for episode 2. Today's episode is all about journaling. Journaling is almost a therapy cliche at this point. Have you tried journaling? And it definitely gets a pretty strong reaction from clients when I bring it up, one way or the other. Journaling practices can be equal parts cathartic, creative, calming, depending on how you use them. But they can also be nebulous, overwhelming, or frustrating when you really don't know where to start. Luckily, today I'll be joined by Mikey Wessells, who is not only a multi-talented performer, writer, and producer, but has also kept a journal every single day for the past 12 years. He loves it so much that he even created a podcast called My Best Friend's Journal, where he bravely read aloud his real-life journal for the world to hear. He did such a great job that My Best Friend's Journal was recognized by the New York Times. As you'll hear in today's episode, for Mikey, journaling has been more than just a way to process life's ups and downs. It's become an anchor in an otherwise unpredictable lifestyle. Mikey spends much of his time touring land and sea with the vocal groups Shades of Buble, NYC3, and Bachelors of Broadway, and he recently debuted his solo concert, 90s Kid. When he's not on stage, Mikey is a producer, writer, and lyricist, and he is frequently a contributor to morning shows across the country on iHeartRadio and producer of the Found Family podcast. In this episode, we talk about how journaling keeps him grounded, tips for reflecting back if you get a few days behind on journaling, the importance of friendship, and how you might begin or deepen your own journaling practice, even if the idea of a blank page feels a little intimidating. So without further ado, here's today's episode with Mikey Wessells. Hi, Mikey Wessells.
Hi, Lili Tori. How are you?
Great. What have you been doing in between sessions?
Well, one thing that I am consistently doing is journaling. It is kind of my tether. It's the thing that keeps me the most grounded.
Yeah.
I journal every day, or that's not totally true. I journal for every day, but I've got every day accounted for, and sometimes it's a few days between, but I just like to have a document that says everything that I need to lay down for any given day, you know?
Yeah, so you don't necessarily journal on every single day, but you
Right.
journal about every single day.
Yes, that's a better way to say that.
Do you ever find, has there ever been a stretch where you haven't journaled and you get so far behind that you're like, oh, this is snowballed, now I don't want to do it? How do you balance that?
Yes, and it is so stressful. It's funny because it's such a stress relieving thing for me, but if
Yeah.
I let it go for too long, it becomes a stress inducing thing. So I try really hard not to, but the most I've ever done is 12 days if I'm on a trip or something, or if I leave my journal behind, which I try not to do anymore. Then I will go back. I will check my photos. I will check my texts. I will check credit card statements. I will do whatever I have to do
Yes.
to reassemble my days and be able to put them, to keep them recorded. It serves so many purposes for me, both on the negative and positive side of things. If I'm on vacation or if I'm just experiencing joys throughout my day, I want it documented because we don't always remember. I want the silly things that are, quick to be forgotten. But
Yeah.
also, when I'm stressed or I'm having conflict or relationship problems or whatever, putting it down in my journal feels like I literally am giving it a space to be that is not my head.
Yes.
It is like laying it down so I don't have to carry it. Doesn't mean it's deleted, but it just means I can reserve a little space in my head because I've made room for it elsewhere,
Absolutely. Yeah. You've kind of poured that bucket out.
Yeah.
That's amazing. How long have you had this streak going?
I have been journaling since 2013.
Oh my God. So at the time of this recording, that's 12 years.
Yeah, there's documentation for every day. Again, I'll avoid saying I journal every day, but I've written for every day. But it's really fascinating. I've recently been going back and reading entries from a couple of years ago. And it also is super enlightening for how I've grown and places I still want to grow.
Yeah.
I'm looking at simple things. I'm seeing every 2 weeks. A few years ago, I was having the same appointment with this friend of mine. We were getting together, and every 2 weeks he was about 30 minutes late. And I was really frustrated by that. And
Wow.
and I look back and I'm like, I knew it was going to happen because it was a pattern. And still I was upset by it, but it was cherished time that we reserved anyway. We still had plenty of time. We still made an effort to do it every 2 weeks, and it always happened. It just was always late. But I was having a hard time like letting those 30 minutes go. I was almost
Yeah.
poisoning hours that I did have by being upset about the 30 minutes that I didn't, you know?
Yeah.
And I didn't realize that that was part of the pattern until I'm looking at it now. I was like, oh, I cared about this every single week instead of accepting it was going to happen and, moving on like I might try to do today.
Yeah, that's very let them,
Totally.
very Mel Robbins coded of like,
hmm
yeah, you have that choice. You can look back and you can see, oh my gosh, this friend is chronically 30 minutes late.
hmm
Is that enough of a barrier or enough of a problem that this is no longer worth it to me? Or should I just accept that this person is always going to be 30 minutes late and just cherish that? Maybe I can show up 30 minutes late too and just plan around
Totally.
it and enjoy myself still.
It feels so clear now in
Yeah.
hindsight. Hindsight I wouldn't have had if I didn't write it down, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. It's harder to like recognize those patterns without seeing it in print.
Yeah. It organizes my mind. It's like every morning when I wake up, even if I work on cruise ships a lot, I'm traveling all the time, and regardless of where I'm sleeping, I make my bed. Even if there's going to be a room attendant coming in and making it again, I make
Yeah.
it first. It's the first gift I can give myself, you know?
Yeah.
I can have a clean room, a nice neat bed, and whatever else is going to happen that day, at least I have checked that one thing off. It's the same with the journal. I know if I at least whatever else I get done or don't or I'm worrying about or I'm excited about, I at least can count on the fact that something will get written down and I can, there's merit in that day for whatever it was.
Yeah. Do you have like a set structure around like what time of day you journal? Do you have like prompts or is it just like a genuine like sort of word vomit?
It started as word vomit. It's gotten a little more organized now. My schedule changes all the time.
Right.
So I try and make little micro routines. I'll have a routine for this week and a routine for these days, this weekend, whatever it is. And when I get into those grooves, I prefer to journal in the morning if I can. I love to have coffee, do my New York Times puzzles, and journal. But if I am on the road or if I'm busy with other things, it's whenever I can squeeze it in. I love to journal on planes and on trains. And transit is great because it feels
Yeah.
like time that instead of time I've lost to transit, it's time I get for myself. So those
Yeah.
are always, I find more often than not, if I'm in transit journaling, I'm catching up on my journal. If I am having
Yes.
coffee journaling, I'm like up to date. I journaled yesterday and I'm journaling again today, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. I like this idea of micro routines because your schedule, your environment, what your day to day looks like changes so much because you're traveling so often. You'll literally wake up in a different country than where you went to bed.
hmm
Is that another practice that sort of supports your mental health?
Yes, 100%. I can feel if I'm traveling a lot, there have been times when I've woken up and I truly do not know where or when I am. The
Yeah.
seasons are different, the time zones are different, that I
Mhm.
have to think for a second, where am I? And that's pretty disconcerting, it can really mess me up. So
Yeah.
a way to help feel grounded is by there's certain things I can do wherever I am. I just mentioned the New York Times puzzles. I love them. They're like
Yeah.
it's an easy like, warm up for the day wherever I am, but also I can do a workout anywhere. Most hotels have a gym, cruise ships have a gym, but even if they don't, I'll pull up a YouTube video. I always make time for that in the morning because it's another thing that's like wherever I am, that can be mine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Marco Polo and I have a couple.
Such a great app.
It's so good. And I'm constantly selling it to people and they're like, "Do you work for Marco Polo?" And I super don't, but would. It's been the most effective tool for staying close with a couple of different friend groups. And that's something I'll also do in that same morning time. I'll catch up on the Marco Polos. I'll try and they have a little note section of the app. I pay for Marco Polo. I'm full, like I drank the Kool-Aid. I love
You're in
it.
it.
I'm in it. So with the paid version, you can take notes on what's happening and I can go back and, make sure to add my 2 cents for all of my friends' comments. But that's another thing that wherever I am, I can do that. And not only is it routine, but it's connection. It's keeping up with my people wherever we all are?
Yeah, for anyone who doesn't know, Marco Polo is essentially a an app where you can record videos for your friends to watch at kind of a later date. Like I think it's sort of like walkie-talkie
Yeah.
inspired, but it's videos and the person on the receiving end can open it and watch whenever and wherever. And I'm sure that's especially nice for you because,
Hmm.
like you said, you're traveling in different time zones. Maybe you're in Europe when your loved ones are in the States, and you can, it's harder to connect on like a phone call or something, or even FaceTime to both be available at the same time. But Marco Polo allows you to communicate when it's best for you and when's best for them.
I can't nod any harder. It's it's so hard to sell because it sounds like a redundant thing. It's video messaging and it's like, well, we have FaceTime, I could send a video, but for
Right.
whatever reason, it's a thread of videos that you can just pick up and leave whenever you need. It's really, really good for friendships with contradicting schedules.
Yeah, it's kind of like a friendship journal in a way. Like you can look
Totally.
back, like you were saying, and like take notes and all of that. Like I totally see how that aligns with some of your other practices.
I said earlier that I'll check, photos, credit card statements, text. I will check Marco Polo. I will scroll back
Yeah.
to that day and see what we were talking about, which is also good because you asked earlier if I was more word vomity or like had a plan of writing. And usually I write in the order of the day. I'll be like, okay, the amount of times I've written just gym first. I don't actually care. I don't need to know. I can probably assume I went, but I don't. I still write it as just habit. I'm like, okay, I've written one thing. I've begun. And once
Yeah.
you've begun, everything is easier. So I will use Marco Polo to be like, not only what, obviously I went to the gym, I did laundry, dumb things, but Marco
Sure.
Polo can help me get back in the mental space, which is
Hmm.
sometimes harder, especially if I've gone 12 days. It's hard to remember how I felt or what was happening.
Yeah.
A credit card statement will tell me where I was, but it's not going to tell me my mood when I'm talking to my friends.
Yeah.
And that is super valuable from journaling. I don't, sometimes it's a literal log of the day, but it is really valuable for me to see actually where I'm mentally at as well. And no tool is better than Marco Polo for tracking down those feelings.
Yeah, it's also a great tool for checking what outfit you were wearing.
Totally.
I do that when I see clients like this every Tuesday or like the same day every week, and I'll be like, what did I wear last Tuesday? And I'll check my Marco
That is
Polo.
so smart. I wouldn't think about it. I know, well, I don't have the same regular appointments that you have, so it just doesn't come to mind, but that is super useful.
Very helpful.
Yeah.
And so, you pretty famously keep a journal
Mhm.
because you had a
I
podcast called
did.
My Best Friend's Journal where you read through old journal entries for the world to hear. And I'm so curious what inspired that and also what you learned from that experience.
Yeah, I knew, and I still know, and we can maybe get to this later, that when I'm writing in my journal, it feels kind of like I am writing a first draft of something and I don't know what it's going to be. I didn't know this when I first started. I started because a friend of mine had a 5-year journal and I thought that was so fun. And I just got into it and I kept seeing more and more benefits. But then as I was doing it, life can be crazy. And I had a lot of big experiences in my first 5-year journal, a lot of travel, a lot of relationship situations.
Yeah.
And I was realizing as I was finishing it that this was just a lot of exciting story that I wanted to tell somehow, and I didn't quite know how to do it. So my best friend and I were just chatting, and it was 2018, and I want to say, I'm like, podcasts were new. They weren't new, but we were just
They
like
felt
kind of,
new.
they did. I was like, anyone could do a podcast. Let's do it. And it kind of evolved as it started happening. We knew we wanted to do something together. First of all, it was just an excuse to have a creative endeavor with a friend, and
Yeah.
nothing is more fun to me than playing with my friend Cam. So if we can find a way to do that, I'll pretty much do whatever. And so we started this not knowing exactly what, just knowing that we had content in the journal and to see where this would to see what it could become. But then as we started doing it, I was like, oh, this makes a lot of sense. This is inherently relatable because it's a journal. We all,
Yeah.
whether you journal or not, you have your human feelings throughout the day. I don't know what I'm, but like everyone has their ups and downs, and it's on such a micro and macro levels. And so to go through a daily journal, you can see those tiny moments and how they fit into the huge overarching moments of your life, especially in a confined 5-year parameter.
Yeah, I keep thinking of that quote that's like you you can't connect the dots looking forward, you can only connect them looking back.
Yeah, actually, I have this book next to me that I have listened to twice and have been referencing over and over. It's Anne Lamott. It's Bird by Bird. And she
Yes.
said, have you read it?
Oh, yes, it's so
It is
beautiful.
So good. And I dog-eared this page saying almost exactly that. If you don't mind, I'm gonna do a little reading for you.
Please, what a treat.
She's quoting E.L. Doctorow, and he says, writing a novel is like driving a car at night. You can only see as far as your headlights, but you can make the whole trip that way. You don't have to see where you're going. You don't have to see your destination or everything you'll pass along the way. You just have to see 2 or 3 feet ahead of you. And she says that's some of the best advice she's ever heard
I
on
love that.
writing, but also on life. Yeah, I'm reverse engineering what you said. You can't you can only see in hindsight where it was connecting, but it's the same idea that like you don't know what's happening ahead. All you can do is a step at a time, but you can live a whole life that way. You can accomplish and have accomplished everything you've ever done that way?
Yes, I mean our lives are the sum of our days, but we don't realize how one day is kind of stacking on the next
Hmm.
until we can see the full picture. And a journal is such a cool, I mean, literally documentation of that experience. And so I'm sure going back through it and reading through each of your days and what you were experiencing, you look back and you're like, oh, these big milestones happened to me over the past year, 5 years, whatever. But to get back to the granular and really see like how this was building to this
Hmm.
point must just be incredible.
It really is. It's you don't often get to see the full story unless you do something like this or you
Yeah.
know have some other mechanism to document your life, but it is really satisfying. It shows you don't feel growth in the moment. It's really hard to know. Even accomplishing tasks for a larger project, it's hard to feel like you've done the thing until the whole thing is done. But that's not how anything works.
No.
Everything is everything is like bit by bit, and it just becomes really hard to feel that. So being able to look back and read it, I'm like, wow, I did this. I worked to this every single day. I was doing
Yeah.
this. I was trying this, and now I'm here, and I couldn't have known the amount of growth that I've experienced was happening at the time, but I can see it in hindsight.
Yeah. And I'm sure, especially for an experience like working on a cruise ship, there are a few thoughts that I'm having. One is that I think a lot of people, especially being a singer, a performer, a guest entertainer on a cruise ship, I think a lot of people view that as really glamorous. And then I think there's kind of another camp of people who view it as like, oh my God, I could never do that. Like that kind of
Totally.
sounds awful. And then I also feel like when you're doing it, there is this sort of like Groundhog's Day feeling that like every
Hmm.
day is sort of the same. I wake up, I have a cup of coffee, I go to the gym, I maybe go to rehearsal, I go to my shows, like
Hmm.
wake up and do it all over again. And I can see how a journal could be really grounding and that it's evidence that actually, even if the structure of the day was similar, your emotional landscape and experience of that day was different.
Yeah. Yeah. It can be super mind numbing, especially I just finished a transatlantic crossing. We went from Florida to Southampton, and it's mostly sea days. We
Yeah.
stopped twice in 14 days, I think. And
Wow.
so when you are just at sea, it's the same thing over and over. And so
Yeah.
that is also where my little micro routine scheduling is super useful. I am the king of short assignments. I'm the king of little projects. I love to have something. I like to have things that I can divide up and work on. I like to be able to be satisfied every day with progress toward a goal.
Yeah.
And it's actually become very easy for me to do that on these kind of ships, on these little contracts, because I have nothing but time, which can be very scary. It's a little, prison adjacent, except for luxury prison.
Yes.
And my choices get lost in like what feels like limbo,
Hmm.
or own that time and divide it up how I want to. It really can be a gift to just have, someone's feeding me, someone's paying me, and I just have time to do with what I'd like. And so it has become a really productive place for me when I'm on these little contracts. And not that like, I don't know, I don't need productivity to be the measure of how I'm feeling or doing, but it
Sure.
happens because I get joy from breaking it up. I get joy from the little things that lead to productivity. And then at the end of it, I'm like, oh, look at what I made. But more importantly is I had an hour where not only was it joyful, but it was different from the rest of the days. I have an hour that feels like uniquely April 2nd as opposed to one of the million days drifting at sea.
Absolutely. And I find that for a lot of people and a lot of my clients certainly, there's some, I don't know that I want to say resistance, but A lot of people have very mixed feelings about like goal setting.
Hmm.
And so I'm curious, how intentional is that process for you before each of these contracts or these cruises? Like how actively are you being like, what do I want to do at this time? Like, here's my goal and here's how I'm going to go about it. And how much of it is kind of like just meeting yourself where you are?
It's a little of both for sure, but right now I have a couple big projects I've been working on for one of them for months and one of them for over a year. And it is way easier for me to do anything with a deadline. I must have
Yes.
an end date. So when it's personal things like this, especially as an entertainer, when I'm creating stuff that nobody's ever going to tell me, like it's due this day, bring it this day, whatever, it's every aspect of it is on me to make it happen or not. So if I just say I'd like to get this done at some point, I will never be inspired to go do it.
Yeah.
If I have reasons to have them finished, if there's someone I want to show it to by a certain day and I'm only going to see them on these days, then I know I have to get it done by this day because that's the day my friend's available
Right.
or whatever it is. So having these short contracts, I'm like, okay, I know I have 3 weeks, and on the last day I'm going to bring it to this person or I'm going to upload it here or whatever it is. And sometimes I find myself in the last few days of those things rushing to get it done, but still, it's like high school or college where I had an assignment that I had 3 weeks for. No matter what, I'm going to do it in the last 2 days
Yes.
at best. Hopefully, the last 2 days, not the last day. But I give myself grace because obviously most of my deadlines are self-set, and so if I don't get it that day, but I don't need to punish myself. But at least I've got a chunk of it. I have something, and I can keep working. Nobody's gonna fire me. I'm not gonna fire me from my own ambitions, but I know I've done something.
Absolutely. Because I was thinking about when you were kind of introducing this idea that I think a lot of people have this, I don't want to call it a false belief because maybe for some people it's true, but I think a lot of us have this idea in our heads that if I had all the time in the world, if I only had more free time, I could get these things done. I could get these goals accomplished. And what I actually believe to be true is that most people really thrive within constraints. And
Hmm.
so having less time to do something, my mom always used to say, and I know that she didn't create this, but I don't know who did, that projects expand to the time that you give them.
Hmm.
So, like you said, if you have 3 weeks, it will take you 3 weeks. If you have 2 days, it will take you 2 days. So, this idea of like, if I didn't have a job, and I think a lot of us kind of had to face this reality during the pandemic at different levels of quarantine, that most of us found ourselves with more time than we previously had. And like we didn't do all of those things that we always thought we would do at that time.
Hmm.
So I think the idea of what you've mentioned a few times of like building more structure into your day and giving yourself harder deadlines sounds like such a great way to actually go about accomplishing those things when there really is almost like too much time to do them.
Yeah, I have to give myself so much structure because I have very little otherwise.
Yeah.
I No one makes a schedule for me, which is a beautiful thing, but sometimes that means I have a week where I'm like I have these 3 things to get done this week and I can do them whenever I want. Or sometimes I have one day and I know all these things are due this day, so if I don't schedule it very specifically, it won't get done.
Yeah.
But either way, I really cherish the fact that I get to make it myself because then it also means I can be flexible. And, if something wonderful comes up, I don't feel
Yeah.
guilty or have to ask anyone if I can change my deadline or switch my Sunday for Monday. That's another thing because I don't have a real schedule or a very structured work life. Days of the week mean almost nothing to me.
Yeah.
I am just as happy to schedule a meeting on a Sunday or to, work at 9 p.m. on Saturday as I am on Monday at 2 because
Right.
I don't know. It feels wild to me that most people in the world are really operating Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, and I forget it until I'm trying to get something done or reach someone, and I'm like, oh, it's 11 p.m. on Sunday. And of course, no one's paying attention right now. Like, no one else in the world is doing this. But it is really lovely because it means, sometimes there's a concert on a Monday night, and I always feel bad for people who have to get up on Tuesday morning after that. But I'm like, great. So Monday is my Friday this week. Great.
Yeah, you can kind of, again, those micro routines, those micro schedules, kind of
Hmm.
look at what's important to you for the week and kind of go from there.
Hmm.
I love that. And I can imagine it sounds like with traveling so much and being away from home and having sort of this inconsistent routine, not a lot of structure, not a lot of schedule, the supports that exist for you are establishing routine, creating structure for yourself, a sense of consistency, and then a sense of connection through apps like
Mm-hmm.
Marco Polo, connecting with friends. And I'm curious, does that feel like, I can imagine that traveling and being away so much is really fun and really fulfilling. You're performing, you're doing what you love, but I can also imagine that being really hard.
Yes.
And especially because I know that like on a boat, you don't have really access to traditional mental health care. Like, how is that for you to try to, support your own mental health in that way?
It is, it can be really difficult, but also it offers opportunities. So, like I said, Marco Polo is a game changer. It helps me connect, but also knowing that I have, my last contract was 3 weeks long, and now I have another 3 weeks of unscheduled work until my next time away. And so I've known this for months, and because of that, I really prioritize seeing the people that I want to see. So
Yeah.
I've had friend dates on the calendar for months because if I know these are the dates I have, I fill them as soon as I can because it helps me get through the 3 weeks away. I'm like, all right, it's okay because I just got back from, I was in New York this weekend, the city. I live like 2 hours away upstate. So I go into the city to frolic with friends and we've planned maybe last May for a concert and a Broadway show this last weekend. I was like, great, I'm getting off that boat that I'll be on this day. I will come to you this time. And then a whole schedule of friend time works its way around that. The less available I am, because it's a weird juxtaposition that I have so much free time and yet so much time unavailable to my people
Yeah.
because I'm just away. But the more time that I specifically know I don't have, the more important it is for me to maximize my relationships when I am around, which is a gift because a lot of people, if you have a very normal routine or a very regular routine, I should say, because what's normal?
Truly.
It's easy to say, oh, we'll do that. We'll get together sometime. Let's grab
Yeah.
coffee sometime.
Yeah. Oh God, the classic.
Yeah. There's no pressure to do so because you have all the time in the world. It's just like the projects. It's just like, long-term assignments. If you don't have a limit on it, you just figure I'll do it sometime.
Yeah.
It's like living in New York. You don't ever go see the Statue of Liberty, because
Right.
you could whenever. So I never feel like doing it. But
Exactly.
when it's limited, you have no choice but to prioritize it. And I actually think my close friendships I'm very proud of them. And I think they're very good examples of what friendships should be. Of course I do because they're the ones I've chosen, but I am really proud of the relationships we've built. I've got specifically like 9 long-term best friends, and they all are best friends. These are all people I tell everything. We trust each other with our lives. Literally, we have got each other's back in all kinds of situations. And some people might hear 9 best friends, like that's, ludicrous. You have your 1 or 2 or whatever. But these are all people I would call my best friend. And I think that's only possible because I'm able to prioritize it because my schedule is nuts and because Marco Polo is a gift to the world.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we really need to get Marco Polo in here as a sponsor, but
I need to start working for them.
truly. Yeah, I'm just really struck by that because I would say that if I had to pick like some of the top topics that my clients bring up in therapy, I would say like dating is probably number one, but number two is probably friendships
Hmm.
and just how hard it is to make friends as an adult and also maintain friendships as an adult. And
Yeah.
so it sounds like it's just really a priority for you, and that's a big part of it. But in addition to Marco Polo, hashtag not sponsored, what else helps you kind of cultivate and maintain these really notable friendships?
Yeah. There are, because like I said, we've all got each other's backs. There's times when, there's things I don't necessarily want to do, but I prioritize that as well. For instance, a friend of mine was moving recently from Brooklyn and she had this awful adhesive stuck on her shower walls. And I was there one morning. I had that day off and I was like, whatever you need, I'm there to help you move. And so I was scraping off this adhesive. It was awful. But I'm like, this friend has done so much for me and always would.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's not how things work. It doesn't have to be exactly reciprocal, but I just know like I'm really happy to pay into our bank of friendship because I get so much from it as well. And so
Yes.
it's just saying yes when your friends are, looking for whatever it is, whether it's a hangout, whether it's getting drinks or whether it's moving, like
Yeah.
you give into all of it because you receive from all of it. So I really try and make an effort to do what I know my friends would do for me. Sometimes it's dog walking or whatever. It's just the trust I have in them means that they get it back from me. I just want to be an equal player, and that sense of responsibility is not the word because that makes it sound like not joyful, and it really is. But
Yeah.
I feel, yeah, like responsibility to a family.
Right.
We're responsible for our friendships, for our relationships, and these people make me very happy to own up to those responsibilities.
Yeah. I definitely am struck by that because I think there's sort of this impression. I obviously think some of it is social media. I think, some of it is just like traditional media, like television shows and movies. But there is this impression of friendship as I think similar to romantic relationships, it's sort of like idealized and perfect. And, that friendship is like a fun girls' weekend that's like really Instagrammable, or, like weddings, bachelorette parties, all of these fun parts of life, which are great. But that, yeah, there is also this component of really showing up for people when they need you. And sometimes that's inconvenient. And sometimes
Hmm.
it's not fun. And sometimes it's scraping sticky stuff off of a shower. Like it's not
Yeah.
glamorous.
Or sometimes it's expensive, or it's hard. There are
Yes.
things that sometimes it's hard, but it's all worth it for good relationships. I've had looking back in my journal, I'm like, wow, I was having a really hard time. Thank God for these friends. And it's really easy to forget when you were lifted because sometimes it can be blinding, whatever situation you're in. You're just trying to get through, and you don't notice all the people who are carrying you through necessarily. And so when
Yes.
I go back and look, I'm like, wow, like I've been I'm getting verklempt. I've been so supported by my people, and I'm like, what an honor it is to get to do that back, to have made it to the other side, and to be able to lift them in their hour.
Yes. I mean, and that was literally what I was going to ask is like, do you feel like your journal, keeping this journal, has helped you really feel and acknowledge the ways that they've shown up for you that, yeah, maybe sometimes would be easy to sort of forget or look
Hmm.
back and be like, wow, I really got through that hard time, but not really recognizing like how much it was like your supports that showed up for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, sometimes it's very obvious. Like I had just huge family drama a few years back, and that's like a very clear time that people were helping me through. But then also little things like, a friend lets me stay at her apartment and come in at 2 in the morning because I need that night for whatever reason, and it's
Right.
inconvenient. I know I don't feel glad to, barge into my friend's apartment at 2 a.m. But on this one time, she's like, yeah, of course. Like to feel supported counts in so many different ways. It doesn't have to be life or death. It doesn't have to be necessarily even mental health. Maybe they're just like, I know you're gonna have the most joyous moment you can if I can help you in this little way. And my sleep will be interrupted this one night, and our friendship is absolutely worth that.
Yes. And I think too, you're talking a lot about this kind of like reciprocal idea of, I support them and they support me, and I know that this is not at all what you're saying, but just to sort of put a finer point on it, I think also a big part of friendship is like not scorekeeping, that it's
Yes.
not like, well, you did this for, like, this is such a funny example, but I just had a friend stay with me in my house for an extended period. He was working on a show here in Kansas City and needed housing. And so he stayed with me for a few weeks. And he lives in New York, and I have a trip coming up next month to New York. And for some reason, I felt super weird about asking him if I could stay with him when I go to
Hmm.
New York. And when I finally like got up the courage to ask him, he was like, "I just stayed with you for 6 weeks. Like, why are you being like
Yeah.
shy about asking to stay with me for 4 days?" And, on the one hand, I'm like, I don't know. I don't know why I felt weird about that. But on the other hand, I'm like, because it's not scorekeeping. Like, I'm
Hmm.
not
You weren't
tallying.
thinking about that at all.
Right. And that I know that even if we were scorekeeping, like that's not even because like I live in the Midwest and I have a large basement that's like basically a guest suite, and it's really easy for me to host people. And I know that in a New York City apartment, it's a very different ask. And so, that's why I think it's not about the scorekeeping, it's about sort of the feeling of it, like how much it feels like they have shown up for me and wanting to return that back from a place of love, not from a
Hmm.
place of I owe you this.
that example of it not being equal anyway because of your house versus his apartment is such a good one because we all don't offer or need the same things. I'm able
Right.
to give more in a certain area than a friend would be able. I can't ask for the exact same thing in return because we're different people with different strengths and weaknesses. And so
Yeah.
to be able to offer what we can and take what we need, very communist friendships.
Yes. The secret to long-term friendships. I love that. And I do love how your journal helps you recognize the depth of your friendships. I think it's
Hmm.
like if you think back to like college and taking notes during class, we write things down because it helps us remember. Like that's the whole
Yes.
point. And so I really see how journaling accomplishes that. I know we talked a little bit already about the structure of your journal, but
Uh-huh.
within that, you have a specific like gratitude practice, or like are you just writing down the good, bad, and the ugly and the boring? Like,
Good, bad, ugly, boring for sure. And it often helps inspire me to, write other things. But in my journal itself just gets, again, I start with a very mundane, like routine. I'm like, I got up early and did this. And then all of a sudden it lets me be freer to be like, oh yeah, and I ran into this person, which reminded me that I felt like this because it just kind of
yeah,
it starts very structured and ends up very free flow and pretty consistently.
yeah,
But it's something you just said reminded me that like the writing of it itself is also part of the well-being, the part of the joy.
yeah.
I'm so often on my phone watching a
Mhm.
movie and eating a snack, and I feel a constant need to have like three different things to like fully distract me, fully like make me numb or whatever. And I find journaling, you must use your eyes and hands and well, you don't really need your ears. I could listen to music, but it takes most of me to do it. I
Yeah,
can't, it's hard to be distracted. So just the act of doing it is meditative. The act of like stopping, blocking other things out, and completing this thing helps me just be here for a minute. It's very grounding. It's very helpful to like make me remember to live in the moment. It's the
yeah,
same as I listen to a ton of audiobooks and I'm reading more than I used to, but I've always loved listening to audiobooks because I can do it while I'm doing other things, which is
yeah,
lovely. I can work out or drive or do laundry, but I've recently started really enjoying reading actual books because I can't do other things. And
yeah,
it is another way to just be only right here, right now. And so taking it back to the journaling, it's a way to say every day I have one moment that I'm going to just be in that moment. I know nothing else is going to get in the way. So whether it's a structured thing or free form or, you know, a little sketch, a little drawing,
yeah.
it is a moment for me.
Yeah. And I keep thinking like it really forces you to slow down. I especially can type freakishly fast. And so if I were like typing a journal, I could just like let my brain go and just like really fly with it. But like writing, obviously, like handwriting
Hmm.
is much slower. And yeah, I can imagine like you have to kind of force your brain to slow down and really think
Yeah.
out like what you mean.
There are journals there's a million journals. I think the Apple apps come with a journal now. And friends are always like, why don't you try this? And like, one, I'll never do it. I have the habit I have and I will not switch.
Yes.
But two, it's not serving the same purpose for me. There's something cathartic in the physical act of doing it.
Yeah.
I find that too, actually, so I edit someone else's podcast, and it is another thing where I have to put headphones on. I have to use my eyes and my hands. There is nothing else I can do. And while it is work, and it often feels like work, it is also oddly meditative. I
Mhm.
lock in, and I find sometimes hours have passed and I don't realize it. And it's not that I'm dying to go to work, but I do so value that it just forces me to just be there. And it can be, I don't realize until I take the headphones off how relaxed I am, how good I feel, how focused.
Yes.
And it is, I don't want to say not possible because I could force myself to be a little better and put my phone in another room when I'm watching TV or whatever. But it's harder to make that happen unless you are in a task where it actually is the only option.
Yeah, I feel like flow state is so much less common these days because it is so hard to reduce all potential interruptions or distractions and just like maintain that level of focus because there is so much to distract us.
Hmm.
And so yeah, when you get those moments where you just don't even notice how much time has passed and you realize like how much you were able to really put into what you were doing, it's rare.
Can I also say that this is kind of unrelated to anything right now, but another thing that has come across my mind as far as my mental health is concerned in the last few months, where we all have, perhaps dealt with more mental health obstacles than we were previously, is letting go of a lot of routines that served me at a different time. I used to be obsessed with podcasts, and I still love my podcasts. However, many of them are current events and political. And I mean, I have like 12 I was listening to all the time. Some
Yeah.
are an hour, some are 12 minutes, but still, it's so much content. And a lot of them were repeating the same things. And, in January, I took a complete hiatus. I was like, I don't want to listen to anything, which is why I started reading more books and listening to more things because actually I just listened to Stephen King's On Writing, and he talks about that all the time. He's like, do we really need another viewing of Sex in the City, or can you listen to a book for 30 minutes, or if you're waiting in line in a grocery store, you can scroll on Instagram, or you can read 5 minutes of a book.
Yeah.
And I've taken that advice, and it is so helpful. Not only is it stress relieving, but it is creativity inducing because I didn't
Yes.
realize the room I was taking up in my head with stuff that is out of my control anyway, stuff that I know
Mhm.
is anxiety inducing, and leaving it aside. The goal was not to become more creative, but all of a sudden I was like, oh my God, I have more ideas about the things that I actually want to do, more ideas about things that pertain to my immediate personal, professional life that are not
Mhm.
giant world events that, of course, I care about, but I simply can't obsess over.
Right.
And I loved for many years was listening to the same podcasts, and I appreciate the info they've given me, the entertainment they've given me, and the work they've done, but it is not serving me in this moment. And so to be like, maybe don't instinctively go to my, weekly subscribed podcast this week and see how that feels.
Yeah.
It's been very helpful, and it's been easy to keep up with that release of those things.
Yes, there's so much that I love about what you just said. I love how you framed it, which is just the idea that this is something that used to serve me and it's just not serving me anymore, rather than sort of shaming ourselves for like, why am I spending so much time on my phone? Or why am I looking at the news so much? I know this is bad for me. I know this is wrong, blah, blah, blah. But I think, especially in this situation that you're talking about, there was a previous Trump presidency, and
Hmm.
perhaps you coped with that in a certain way at that time. Like we have something direct to compare it to.
Right.
And the way you coped or showed up for that presidency, like may be different from how you're showing up for it now.
Yeah.
And that's okay. We have to meet ourselves where we are now. And so I love just the way that you framed that. And then something that I've thought about for years, and I know I got this idea from someone else, and I'm not currently entirely certain who it was from, but this idea of input versus output. What are we ingesting, and then what are we putting back out into the world? And what's
Mm,
that ratio like? And
totally.
and I know that yes, like probably people listening are like, well, reading a book is still like input, but even some of the research suggests that reading a book is a more creative act as far as how our brain shows up when we're reading is much more aligned with creation than with when we're ingesting like a television show or a movie or the news, because our brains are, creating a world and
Totally.
visualizing and hearing it in a way that's not being spoon fed to us.
Yes.
Yeah. And so I think in some ways you could align reading a book more with creativity or output, but in general, thinking to yourself, how much am I taking in and how much am I putting back out?
I have never thought of it like that, and that is such a great metaphor for because it's how our bodies function, Like
Yeah,
I
right.
literally, you put good food in, you get good reactions. If you put bad food in, you feel bad. And it is no different to our mind. And to your point about the book itself being a more creative act, again, Stephen King on writing. I haven't read a single Stephen King book ever, but I read his book on writing. Um, he says he's talking about how to describe any given situation, and he uses this example of a bunny in a cage with the letter 8 painted on its back. It's very specific.
Yes.
But also you don't need to say it was a white bunny in a metal cage with a blue 8 painted on its back. You let the reader imagine what that is. All of us have our own bunnies we put in there, and it doesn't matter. The point is that there's a bunny in a cage. You don't need to know if it was a glass cage, a net cage, or whatever. And those little things that we don't even realize we're doing for ourselves, you never think like, oh, I probably constructed this bunny different than my friend would.
Yeah.
It just doesn't matter. You're just doing it innately however you would do it, and you don't get the opportunity to do that with other entertainment, with TV. Listen, I'm a giant Severance fan. I still have the White Lotus finale to watch tonight. I'm not. Of course, it's very fun and very satisfying. And also, books can offer something else,
Absolutely. Yeah. Again, we talk about this a lot on this podcast, but it's all about a diversity of supports, coping strategies, things that we do to support our mental health. It's not that one is bad and one is good. It's that we need a diversity. And frameworks like input versus output can be really helpful when we're trying to figure out what is it that we're missing? What's missing in our tool belt? Oh, I have a lot of things that give me kind of that comforting input, but what could help me with that output? Things like reading or, hobbies and creative tasks.
Yeah. I'm finding like taking them all and whatever amount I can at any given moment has also been very helpful. Like sometimes I read 2 pages and that's it. But if I read 2 pages every now and then for a week, I've finished a book. It's just like we were saying about not being able to see ahead of you, but you just, you keep stepping and you get there. It's the same with anything. I'm finding a lot of micro work sessions have been very helpful for me.
Yeah.
And it's also good for my crazy schedule. I just know that just do it at all for the habit, just like the gym, just like my journal. I just do it. Sometimes it's better. Sometimes the workout's better. Sometimes I wrote something more enlightening, but no matter what, I'm going to do it because it helps ground me. And even if that's a tiny little amount, it still gives me a satisfaction that is not reflected in the quality of the thing, you know?
Kind of the process over the product. I love that. Well, I have so enjoyed this conversation, and I'm curious, after everything that we've talked about, what are you going to do before your next session?
Yeah. Well, I have a project I'm working on with my best friend who I hosted that old podcast, My Best Friend's Journal, with. Actually, him and I live together now. We're upstate New York, and a lot of life circumstances have changed, and all of a sudden we get the joy to live together, and it's so fun.
What a gift.
I'm truly grateful every day. He's my mental health. That's not fair. That's not a nice thing to say, but he is, like, his presence and the life we get to live right now in this moment is this really made me feel very happy.
Yeah.
Anyway, we are going to start a little project. It's vague about what it is because we're still figuring it out, but tomorrow we are beginning in earnest. I've been doing a lot of prep work, and I'm very, very excited to just get a chance for us to work together again, because regardless of what it is, it means I get friend time and I get to try something new. So those 2 things are thrilling for me.
Yeah, it sounds like you're, creating a new source of output from all of this input and continuing to deepen your relationships that are so important to you and so supportive to your mental health. And I absolutely can't wait to find out more about what it is.
Yeah, sorry not to be vaguey McVagerson. I just, I don't know yet, so I couldn't quite say, but I know it's something, and I look forward to sharing that at some point.
I'm sure it will be great, and I will keep listeners posted. Mikey, thank you so much for chatting with me today and being on In Between Sessions. This has been such a wonderful and joyful conversation, and I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. I always cherish any opportunity to chat with you.
What I loved about this conversation with Mikey is that this episode was about journaling, but it wasn't just about writing something in a notebook. It was also about taking time to be present, to focus, and reflect in a world where we're so often doing so many things at once, or even looking at 2 screens at once, like Mikey mentioned. I also loved his thoughts on friendship and the value of not only investing in our friendships, but actively practicing gratitude for them, through journaling or otherwise. If Mikey can maintain friendships from thousands of miles away, oftentimes in the middle of the ocean, we can too. I hope this conversation sparked some curiosity or inspiration for your own journaling practice, whatever that looks like for you. Whether you're writing daily, jotting down thoughts once a week, or just reflecting in your notes app in between meetings, it all counts. If you enjoyed this episode, I'd be so grateful if you'd follow the show, leave a review, or share this episode with someone who might benefit from hearing it. And if journaling is something you're trying out after this conversation, I'd love to hear about it. Feel free to reach out on Instagram at InBetweenSessionsPodcast or send me an email at the address in the show notes. I'll also link some of the resources Mikey mentioned during today's episode. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you next time in between sessions.